Thank you, Chris. The title this morning, How Do We Know Who We Are? Today we again run into the terrific that was typical in the ministry of Jesus. We again witness the triumph of transforming tenderness over the trivial. This poor crippled man had been helpless and hopeless for nearly 4 decades. He would spend his days at this city pool whenever he could beg anyone to bring him down there. Legend had it that every once in a while, an angel would come and stir up the water. The first poor wretch who could get himself into the pool would then be healed. And so on a daily basis, the crippled, the blind, and the paralyzed would gather hoping for a miracle. We can only frown and shake our heads at such superstition. Then again, we're only about a half hour from either Cottage or the Hitchcock. Superstition aside, Jesus intervenes and mercifully heals the man. After almost 40 years being crippled, the man is on his feet, up and at him, and off on his way. Wonderful. As soon as he can get his address, there'll be a guy over from the Reader's Digest to do a feature on him. It's the feel-good story of the month. What's not to like about this picture? Well, hold on just a bit. We do have that saying, no good deed goes unpunished. The clergy bigwigs of that day, the Jerusalem Council of Churches, are up in arms because this man is on his feet. You see, Jesus made the big mistake of setting up his portable clinic on the Sabbath. Healing is work, and it was against the religious law to do any work on the Sabbath. These weren't just any rules, said they. They were God's rules. That the man was finally free after 40 years cut no ice with them. So furious were they with Jesus that they renewed their vows to execute him. And down the road they did just that. How could they so ruthlessly rain on that man's parade? Were they really the insensitive idiots they seem to be to us? There was some method to their madness. Let's pause and ponder before we recite them the whole riot act. The Jews were an occupied country, a captive nation, and an unpopular, persecuted minority in a cruel, hostile world. They had been overrun and run over for centuries. Currently, the Roman boot heel was on their necks. It was dangerous to be a Jew. There were wonderful reasons not to go to the trouble. To instead give up their unique but painful identity and just blend in. The melting pot would have been so much safer, so much easier. Now, the job of their religious leaders was to keep the troops together, to see to it that they paid the price to be faithful Jews within a sea of non-believers. They understood their identity as Jews, as God's people, to depend on 3 things. The first one involves males only. Circumcision. Second, the kosher food laws. And third, the strict observance of the Sabbath. This trio of traditions was no line in the sand. It was seen by the leaders as a cement block wall, holding back a sea of unbelief and obliteration. Violate these three behaviors, and the wheels come off. You are no longer really a Jew, no longer truly one of God's people. That's how you knew who you really were. You are circumcised, you maintain a kosher table, and you keep the strict Sabbath laws. Those things tell you you are God's people. Now, some examples, some explanation. The first one, circumcision, I'm not going to explain. If you need it to be explained, it'll have to be done somewhere else and some other time. The kosher laws, a word about that. And this would refer to the Orthodox, very serious, strict Jews currently. They may not eat anything that comes from a pig. So no bacon, no ham, no shellfish, no rabbits, reptiles. None of that may be eaten. What can be eaten is mammals with split hooves that chew their cud. That's okay. Birds and mammals must be slaughtered in accordance with Jewish law, and such products are labeled certified that way. All blood must be drained out or broiled out first before it's served. So if you like your prime rib rare, you're out of luck. Meat cannot be eaten with dairy products. So if you have a hamburger, you can't have a glass of milk with it, and you can't have ice cream for dessert. Utensils that were in contact with non-kosher food can't be used. Grape juice and wine are okay, but only if produced by Jews. Manischewitz comes to mind, and there may be some others. So these are strict Jewish laws which must be kept, and that's what helps make you a Jew. Now the Sabbath, this gets more interesting. No work of any kind. You may not touch an electric switch. Putting on the light in the room is considered work. You may not drive a car, and you may not ride in one. So if you're going to travel, you also cannot go further than a mile, and we've got to walk. No electricity. You may use candles, but you may not light them on the Sabbath. That's work. If you're going to light your candles, it has to be done. The Sabbath begins Friday evening, so you light your candles 15 minutes before sunset. Other things that you may not do on the Sabbath, which are considered work. Any writing, or erasing, or tearing of paper or anything. No business transactions may be conducted. I mentioned driving or riding in any vehicle. Any shopping at any time. You may not use the telephone. You may not turn on or off any electric devices. Where's Al? No computer, Al. You can't turn on the air conditioning. I think if you were in Florida in the summer, you might be able to put it on before the Sabbath actually begins, but then you'd have to leave it on. No cooking or baking. So any food you're going to consume has got to be prepared before the Sabbath. No gardening. No mowing of the lawn. No laundry can be done. The light in the refrigerator has got to be disconnected. So you can open the refrigerator door, but you can't have the light go on. That's considered work. And finally, you may not read any kind of advertisements. Now, if you have a family, the young people would find this burdensome, children, and they would ask their parent, "What? My friends in school don't have to do all this stuff. Why do we?" And the Orthodox Jew would say, because we are God's people, and these are God's laws, and doing these things tells us who we are. Now comes this self-appointed prophet from the sticks of Nazareth to start prying loose the blocks in that cement wall I mentioned, to open a hole to let the sea of infidels flood in. The clergy of the Jerusalem Council make more sense than at first glance. There was a method to their madness. But it was madness. The God of Israel wanted something else from them and from us, and he always has. We know who we are by another quite different mark of identity. Israel's prophets were quite clear about the essential elements in the identity of God's people. Hear the passion of the prophet Amos. "I hate solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offering of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your hymns. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Jesus came much more quickly to the essence of our Christian identity. The fundamental, the indispensable. John's Gospel, chapter 13. "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this will everyone know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Rodney Stark, in his recent book, The Rise of Christianity, explains to us that one major reason for the growth of the Christian faith before 300 AD was the unique behavior of Christians during epidemics. I think this is quite important. The ancient world was periodically devastated by epidemics of smallpox, measles, and other great plagues against which they had no resistance. Anywhere from a quarter to a third of the population perished during some epidemics. During one outbreak of terrible disease, 5,000 people a day died in Rome alone. In another epidemic, 2/3 of the population of Alexandria perished. Dionysius, the Christian bishop of Alexandria, described the behavior of the pagan population during such epidemics. At the first onset of the disease, they pushed the sufferers away and fled from their dearest, throwing them into the roads before they were dead, and treating unburied corpses as dirt, hoping thereby to avert the spread and contagion of the fatal disease. But do what they might, they found it difficult to escape. Some years later, the secular historian Thucydides gave us an account of events as a deadly plague struck the city of Athens. He reported that once the contagious nature of the disease was recognized, people were afraid to visit one another, and as a result, They died with no one to look after them. Indeed, there were many houses in which all the inhabitants perished through lack of any attention. The bodies of the dying were heaped one on top of the other, and half-dead creatures could be seen staggering about in the streets or flocking around the fountains in their desire for water. The temples in which they took up their quarters were full of the dead bodies of people who had died inside of them. Now contrast these pagan accounts with this account from Dionysius of the Christian believers' behavior during one of those awful epidemics. Most of our brother Christians showed unbounded love and loyalty, never sparing themselves and thinking only of one another. Heedless of danger, they took charge of the sick, attending to their every need and ministering to them in Christ. And with them departed this life serenely happy, for they were infected by others with the disease, drawing on themselves the sickness of their neighbors and cheerfully accepting their pains. Many in nursing and curing others transferred their death to themselves and died in their stead. The best of our brothers lost their lives in this manner. A number of pastors, deacons, and laymen, winning high commendation. So that death in this form, the result of great piety and strong faith, seems in every way the equal of martyrdom. During these times, the Roman Emperor Julian launched a campaign to institute pagan charities in an effort to match the Christians. Julian complained in a letter to a pagan high priest that the pagans needed to equal the virtue of Christians, for by their benevolence toward strangers and care for the graves of the dead, many were being converted. Julian added that the Christians support not only their own poor, but us as well. This example of Christian loyalty and heroic affection was not lost on the pagan population. They were powerfully impressed with the difference between the compassion of the Christian minority and the callousness and carelessness of their pagan comrades. Converts followed. Commitments to Christ resulted. And I think it's important to notice that it was not just the power of the Holy Spirit coming over people and seeing to their conversion. It was also the example, as these pagans clearly saw what it meant to be Christian, and they were won over. Indeed, quote, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." We conclude by acknowledging, recognizing the radical nature of Christ's command. His was a radical, astonishingly accepting love, at times a sacrificial love. It stops us in our tracks, makes us reconsider our own commitment. Our hesitancy is not a bad thing. It's a love we're not always up to, but we cannot escape its radical nature. Christ's Sabbath healing of the crippled man was a radical step. He caused a stir, elated some, infuriated others. It contributed directly to his own death. The radical, death-defying compassion of those 3rd century Christians made an unforgettable impression on their pagan neighbors. It helped change that society and won people to the church. No, our hesitancy is not a bad thing. But Jesus of Nazareth and his love are radical. So must we do the best we can with God's help.